All right, continuing our little trip down memory lane here from some of our old ecology slides that I had. We're going to take a look at the water treatment plant at Torrejon Air Base outside of Madrid in Spain. And this was part of our summer ecology program, and we took a field trip. We went to see the water treatment plant and then later the sewage treatment plant, and we'll be doing that next probably. Now, it started off with a visit to environmental service over in the hospital area where the sergeant gave us a little lesson on what they do to test the water on base, showed us some of the various tests that are used. pH, which is the relative acid or neutral or basic properties of a fluid. In this case, it was water. And then also for doing a screen in which they run water through a filter, then put that filter on a bacteriological agar plate, and then see the number of colonies and the kinds of bacteria that may be in the water. So that was our briefing. That's what we're doing here. So we went over to the water plant, which was just the other side of the road of the flight cafeteria there and the operations of the flight line. And here we're looking at a chemical, ammonium sulfate, which is nicknamed alum, which is used, that we'll tell you about in just a moment. And here there are 4 mixing chambers. 3 of them are used to mix alum with the water, and 1 of them is used to mix lime. And the alum is used to make something that's called a flock, and we'll tell you what that is. So when alum is mixed with the water and the pH of the water is at neutral 7.0, it forms a gel-like precipitate that bridges or sticks together. It's an amorphous mass. And then this, when it's in the water, it's like little snowflakes. And then any suspended material in the water attaches to this. And this is called the flock. And this occurs in the flocculation tank that we'll see here very shortly. And here's a little bit more. And as the flock forms, it settles, leaving the water rather clear because it's taking out the particular matter, whether it's sand or even some bacteria and things. Anything that will attach. It's kind of a sticky stuff, and that settles out. But in order for it to work properly, you must have a pH at 7. So that's why it's important that if you're making a flock, you have to chemically test the water to be sure of its pH. Now, if it's acid, and often that's what the water came in as, you'd have to add lime to it. Lime would help bring up the pH and make it more toward the neutral. Too much lime would make it on the other side, and that would be alkaline, and you wouldn't want that. You want it right there in the middle, and that's where the alum works the best. Now, another thing that might be added to the water is chlorine. Chlorine gas, we say we chlorinate the water, and that tends to kill the bacteria. So if you have water coming in from the river, may have bacteria in it, you chlorinate it to kill the bacteria. Sometimes you can taste a little bit of chlorine in the water. They use this in swimming pools as well. Not in this form. This is the real toxic, poisonous form here, but they're using it in very small, measured quantities. So, this is where the flock, the alum mixed with water, would come in to mix with the water, and these are the mixing tanks. And here there's a kind of a chain device that causes big paddles in these flocculation tanks to mix the incoming water with the alum to make the flock. These are flocculation tanks. And there's where you see some of the flock that hadn't mixed very well. And that's sort of what it looks like. And see, this water was not very clean, but river water here. So the flocculation with its big paddles just slowly mixes the flock with the water, again trying to have that amorphous mass pick up any particulate matter that's suspended in the water. Then the flock settles, and then that's just drained off and discarded. And there's some pretty dirty river water. You can't even see the paddles that are stirring around in here. But then they move into the sedimentation tanks here. And there you can see the flight line ops over in there. And just the other side was the airstrip. And the water comes in underneath, and you try to keep it still now so that any other residual material will settle. And then it comes up over these weirns, these little notches here, and then flows down. And there's just another shot of it. These are settling tanks. You can see the water coming off of those on the sides. And then, if there's a water source that doesn't need this filtering or this flocculation, this is a bypass pipe. You can't see it here very well, but that's what I've written there. And this will bring like Madrid water. Let's say we are able to use some of Madrid water. Doesn't need all this processing because it's already been processed, but we're putting it into our system, and that would be the bypass pipe. But water from the river would mix with water from the bypass pipe, and then it would go to the sand filters. Let's move that down a little bit. There we go. So the sand filters, just like in a swimming pool, the water goes in on the top, moves through the sand, that filters out additional thing, any flock that might have been left in there. And that's what the students are looking at. And then down in here, these are the water going through the sand. And there's a little bar here that every once in a while the filters may get dirty. So you have to clean the filters. And we do that through a process called backwashing. And this is controlled at the control panel inside, where they would shoot water down from this bar, and that would like break up any sediment that is formed on the top of the sand pile. And then that wastewater would be drained off to send to the sewage treatment plant. And again, you're using your clean water to backwash your filters, so you want to keep this to a minimum. And there's our Chief Master Sergeant there. I think his name was Chief Master Sergeant Wallace. And this is the panel that controls the sand filters and the backwashing of them. And now also, depending upon what the chemist, because the water is constantly being tested and analyzed, and they're interested in bacterial count, where they might add more chlorine. And then it goes off to standing tanks. Again, this is the flight line here. This was just outside the water treatment plant, and I don't know how many thousands and thousands of gallons that could be stored here. But if it was chlorinated, the concept is it has to stay in contact with the water. I believe it's 14 hours minimum for it to be deemed safe for drinking. And we call the water that is safe for drinking potable water. And the next step is, what do you do with this water that's in a tank? Well, it has to be pumped into your piping system to go throughout the base. And we went and visited that. Of course, it was very noisy because the pumps make a lot of noise. We should have had hearing protection. And there's a series of pumps. Usually they're electric, but there is a diesel backup pump. And what this does is pump the water out and give pressure to the water so that when you turn it on, it comes on with pressure. And all of this is monitored, telemonitored uh, throughout the process, and these little red lights go off if things aren't working correctly. And then as we pump water into the system, and suppose the faucets were off, well, the pressure would keep building up and the pipes would break. Well, in all systems, they have to have something like this, which is our water tower. And if all the faucets are off, the water then is pushed up into this water tower. And then when that water tower gets filled, the signal is sent and the pumps shut down. So now the weight of the water in the tower provides the pressure throughout the base. And again, this is monitored. This is a recent picture that I took from the web of the tower at Torrejon. We used to have it, as I recall, it was red and white and checkered and things. So before the base had Madrid water, there were times we had to take it from the river. I forget the name of the river, but it was the river that supplied Madrid too. And at times it wasn't of good quality. It had a funny taste. It used to taste like chlorine. But then they said it wasn't chlorine. It was somebody up the line, putting putting pollutants in there and phenols or something. But in later years, they didn't recall it, but I remember that. Madrid had really good water because it was coming from the Sierra Nevada mountains there. Most of the time, we don't think about water, we just use it. But note what is working in the background to keep us safe and healthy. And in our next video, we'll see what goes on to make sewage water into what we might call gray water that was used to water the golf course and was put back into the river. It wasn't ready for drinking, but theoretically, if you took that water and ran it through this system, it would make it potable again. Okay, water treatment plant.